Good morning, and welcome to Community Conversations hosted by the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. My name is Crystal Knight, and I will be your host for today. NBCSL, also the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, joins the nation in commemorating the 70th anniversary of the landmark Supreme Court decision, Brown versus Board of Education. This historic ruling, delivered on May 17, 1954, declared state laws establishing separate public schools for Black and white students to be unconstitutional, marking a pivotal moment in the fight for educational equity and civil rights in America. Despite progress made since Brown versus Board of Education, NBCSL encourages lawmakers, educators, advocates, and communities to reflect on the progress made, acknowledge the work that still needs to be done, and to commit to advancing educational equity for every child. Today, we have the great pleasure of having a community conversation with two individuals who will give us some insight on the educational outcomes and where we are in America today as it relates to educational equity. The first person is Representative Robinson. Felecia Simone Robinson is a Florida House of Representatives representing District 104. She holds significant roles, including the Vice Chair of Education for the Florida Legislative Black Caucus, and she is a Democratic ranking member of important subcommittees like the Child, Families, and Senior Subcommittee and the State Administration and Technology Appropriations Committee. She has an impressive 29-year tenure as an educator in the Miami-Dade public school system, including roles as a math teacher, department chair, math instructional coach, and assistant principal. Representative Robinson has firsthand knowledge of the challenges and opportunities in education. Her leadership extends beyond legislative duties as she also serves as the NBCSL's Education Committee Chair. Welcome, Representative Robinson.
Well, thank you for having me here. And actually, thank you all for actually having this conversation. I always say that we have to start having the conversations that need to be had. And when we start talking about education, which truly is the foundation for everything, I'm so glad that we're having this conversation today.
Great. Glad for you to join us and really excited to get into the conversation. Before we begin this conversation, I want to introduce our second guest, Mr. Brendan Mitchell, who brings a wealth of experience and expertise to the panel as the Associate Director of Human Rights and Community Relations for the American Federation of Teachers. With a background deeply rooted in social justice and civic engagement, Brendan is passionate about advancing educational equity and empowering teachers. His extensive experience supporting initiatives in the U.S. House of Representatives and collaborating with the NAACP further enriches his perspectives and adds depth to his insights. We are excited to have Brendan Mitchell join us and look forward to his valuable contributions to the conversation on educational equity and empowerment. Welcome.
Thank you, Crystal. And it is a pleasure to be here with NBCSL family and with Representative Robinson for this really important conversation on a day that's a little difficult for us right now to talk about. So ready to
Right.
dig.
Well, great. And we know that education continues to be one of America's biggest ideological fights. During 2020, it was the war against the woke. In 2022, it was book bans. Now it's DEI. And we hear this term being used to eliminate, particularly in the state of Florida, diversity programs all across the state. So I actually would love to start this conversation off with Representative Robinson, considering the state of education in the country and considering what your governor has done as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Where does that leave folks who are in the education arena when they're thinking about either continuing in their respective professions or entering into the education arena, considering books have been banned, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs have been eliminated? How do people really grapple with this moment in time?
So as you stated, we know that those programs, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, were very critical um, in our workplaces and in education. And yes, unfortunately, the governor of Florida has played a major role in putting restrictions into place. Well, my first thing is what we need to actually do is we need to sit back and strategize. We can't continuously do what we have been doing, and that's restating what has happened. I
Mm-hmm.
believe, and I urge policymakers, I urge people that we have to, one, we recognize the harm that it's going to do with stripping away these funds and these different initiatives. So now I think we need to sit back and strategize on what we are going to do about it. And when I say what we're going to do about it, I believe that's going to take a collective group. It's not going to be something that just policymakers can do, because at this time in a lot of states, policymakers that care about it is outnumbered. So we have to think out of the box, and we have to work with other partners, such as, like you said, the NAACP, the National Council of Negro Women, all of the Divine Nine are organizations that can actually have the numbers to make the difference, and and use our power in that way to actually be able to make a change. It's not going to happen overnight because they wasn't able to take it away overnight, but we have to start now with organizing and coming up with a plan so that we can actually take our, I always say take our Florida back, but actually take America back, because we know that these programs are important, but I think it's going to take us pulling together to make it happen.
Absolutely. And I'd love to really turn this conversation as well and bring Mr. Mitchell in, just from the perspective of your organization and what AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, how do you all view what is happening in Florida? And then how are book bans incorporated into this elimination of DEI? We see different school districts across the country banning books like Toni Morrison's, who is a great, author, and someone who has really charted a lot of history in this country, for her type of books to be eliminated, among others. What does this mean for the teachers who are trying to figure out new curriculums moving forward?
Well, so I want to level set with today is obviously this conversation being around Brown, right?
Mhm.
Because it's all connected. This through
Mhm.
line is here. Um, Educators in Florida don't feel very different from educators in New York, from educators in Chicago or California. And I want to make that clear, because what we're seeing in Florida is scaring and frightening and creating this sense of fear and struggle within communities across the country. These policies are not just, winning in Florida and becoming effective there, but we're seeing them spread to Alabama. I just got back from Louisiana. They're attacking public education, they're attacking unions, they're trying to dismantle the systems that created and supported the elevation of Brown v. Board and its success in 1954. The AFT was the only education organization in 1954 to file an amicus brief in support of Brown. And we were proud then, as we are now, to stand where educators stood. And in that amicus brief said clearly that we believe that education is the vehicle to leveling the playing fields, equalizing our society, and ensuring that citizens and young people have what they need to thrive and become productive members of society. AFT said that in 1954. We also, disbanded ourselves or disaffiliated ourselves from Southern locals at the time who refused to desegregate their membership, right? And so when we talk about how teachers feel now, teachers are united. I think in Florida, I work there. I want to be very clear. I'm a native of Ocala, Florida. a very small red dot in the middle of the state. And we deal with these different politics. And so whether you're in Ocala or Miami, teachers are unified across the state. The energy we're seeing is there because educators are clear. They've been teaching these curriculum. You have 30-year educators in social studies who you're now telling have to shift the entirety of what they've been taught themselves, what they've trained on, what they've done professional development for, to now shift that policy or to shift that curriculum based on policy. And that's what educators are not supporting. And so we're really proud of our members in Florida who are not only fighting in the classrooms, but fighting to keep their unions alive. Because at the same time, Ron DeSantis knows that the first line of defense, and many of the conservatives understand the first line of defense of our classrooms are our educators, and the union supports its educators. And so they have attacked us in Florida. They have not only passed the policies to ban books, but they passed the policies to really crunch down on the ability for our members to collectively bargain and to come together. And they've attacked our ability to collect dues from our members. So every way we've possibly been able to support community, they're coming for us, but we're still giving away banned books in Florida and across the country. We just gave away our 10 millionth book last week. Our president, Randy Weingarten, was really excited to celebrate that. And we did it all over the country last week. 10 million books, many of them banned, and will continue to do so. That's the fight.
Great. That is a fight. And I love that you talked about how teachers are united in this fight against book banning and just in this fight against the DEI programming that's happening. What are some of the Black teacher statistics, particularly within AFT? I want to just stay on the teachers since you brought them up. What are some of the statistics across the country as it relates to Black teachers that are a part of your union?
So to clarify, our union is 1.75 million members strong. And growing. And one of the things that we recently did, we are actually AFT. So we dropped American Federation of Teachers, and because we represent more than just teachers. And so when you talk about school bus drivers, when you talk about cafeteria workers, when you talk about paraprofessionals, when you talk about higher education professionals, school nurses, nurses in general, public employees. So we represent a swath of America's workers, and many of our members are Black and are not only supporting in the classroom our Black and brown students, but are supporting the facilities around those students as well. So that's a really important, piece for, us to elevate as, we talk about our membership and the statistics of who we are. And for Black folks within our union, it was the Black members of our union. I was hired and brought in by Dr. Loretta Johnson, who sat, next to and with, A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin, and was the voice of the teachers in the 60s and 70s, fighting to desegregate our schools through our paraprofessionals, right? Through those folks who are school support staff, right? And so our members then, Black, just as our members now, are, I think, really strong and robust in their commitment to their Black students. We've had teachers say, I'm not teaching, I'm not going to do that. Black educators, but also our white educators, our Hispanic and our counterparts of all races have just said that this is not the standard that they want to carry in this country and in our classrooms. But I want to say this, Black teachers are in a shortage. We have a teacher shortage in general in this country. We have an issue with teacher pay in this country. So when we talk about mitigating, the economic struggles in the Black community, we need to ensure that we are pipelining more Black students into the field of education, more Black men into the field of education. Every Black male educator in the school reduces the chances of a student, Black and brown student, meeting the juvenile justice system. Like that's statistically proven. Every Black teacher that's in the school that is doing culturally responsive pedagogy and being an example to their Black and brown students is literally carrying a standard that is improving the outcomes for their Black students. And our members really hold themselves accountable to that standard and belief and value, but we need more educators, which is why we're fighting for those policies, not just for teacher pay, but for wraparound services, community schools, and the things that we know give students and the educators the tools they need to thrive.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Brendan, for that. And I want to bring Representative Robinson back into this because you have a long history and career in education, not only as a teacher, but a department chair, but also as an assistant principal. And just from your professional perspective, how do you view these type of actions affecting Black teachers in the classroom? Because as Brendan just stated, these are things that affect people who say, I don't want to do this, or I don't think I want to continue with this profession because I am under attack and I'm really just trying to educate the next generation that will be the future leaders in this country. So would love to just hear your perspective around how these policies affect people in the practical sense in the workplace, because you've been in these classrooms, you've been in these leadership positions where you've had to hear teachers either complain or advocate for curriculum changes.
Yes. Well, as you state, as a Black woman and a legislator in Florida, these issues are deeply personal for me. And I'm definitely committed to educational equality and the preservation of DEI programs. And I just urge, members to stay informed and to be engaged in the fight, because educational and social justice is something that without it, we're not going to really be able to survive. When we talk about teachers in the school, in the classroom, um, it initially, I would say, when they first started pushing some of this legislation, it was a little fear factor. And I've had teachers to come and talk to me about what we're going to do. But after that, having a conversation and actually bringing them together, which I think is really important, knowing that you're not alone in this, that we're going to stand together in this, it gave them the power that they needed to say, look, I'm going to stand and do what I need to do. I'm going to teach what I know I'm supposed to teach. And that we're going to deal, we'll deal with it if something comes up. And I think that we have to have more of that. And they need to know that they have community and parents. And like I said, I brought in the organizations behind them. We must push for policy that supports comprehensive education and inclusive practices. But like I said, we got to fight for that policy. But knowing that we don't necessarily have the numbers in a lot of our states, that means that we have to bring in our community and our parents and everybody else, because they have to be a part of this fight. They have to be a part of ensuring that we have that equality that we need. One of the things that I've been having conversations with locally is that we definitely have to get, and I'm going to say them again, our Divine Nine, our NAACP, our National Council of Negro Women, all of these different, our 100 Black Men, all of these organizations that I know, since I am a part of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated, I know that education is a part of our programmatic thrust. I know these other organizations, these are a part of our mission, a part of our vision. It's what we're doing. So now we need to step it up a little bit, because they're stepping it up a little bit by attacking it. So how are we going to not just do what we have been doing, but take it to the next level to ensure that our kids, and that's where I'm at, our kids are actually having and are afforded the education and the equality that they actually needed. One of the things that I want to kind of back up or go a little bit on, when we talk about Brown versus Board of Education, and I wasn't around at that time, I was born after that. However, when I look at it, I sometimes question, it was a fight to desegregate, to make sure that we were inclusive. However, I think that some of the counterparts took that and ran away with it and um, kind of got us off track on what we were doing. When we had our own schools, we might not have had the the latest edition of a book. We might not have had the best classroom, but our kids were being educated well. And I don't want us, I think that we need to get a little bit back on site and look at how our kids are being educated and making ensuring that it's the top quality of education, whether they're included in this particular neighborhood or not, because that's not what really matters. I don't
Mhm.
want us to, a lot of times people are focusing on now the building that they're in or the books that they have, but we definitely have to make sure that we're making sure that our kids are getting the quality education. And I think that that's what we need to focus a little bit on. And sadly to say, I know now things are coming out with legislation that is just very wide open on the attack on Black history and things like that. But they've been attacking public education for some time
Yeah.
across the board.
Mhm.
And now they're just blatant with it. So we definitely have to look into, how we are strategizing and we're organizing to ensure that we're supporting our teachers, but we're ensuring that our kids are getting that top uh, quality education that we definitely want them to have.
Yeah, I really appreciate you for really rounding out the conversation, Representative Robinson, and bringing us back to really take a look back at the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. And as we continue having this conversation, I want to welcome another special guest that we have. It's with great honor that I have the privilege and opportunity to introduce NBCSL's president, Laura Hall. President Hall is a distinguished leader and advocate for education and community empowerment. Elected in 1993, Representative Hall's commitment to educational excellence is evident through her extensive background in the field of education. She holds a BA in biology from Morris College, a master's degree in science education from Ohio State University, and a certificate or certification in K through 12 administration from Alabama A&M University. And with 33 years in education, including 25 years at the J.O. Johnson High School and as the assistant to the president for at-risk students and special projects at Callahan Community College, Representative Hall brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to the table. And Representative Hall, we've been having this conversation around the anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. And so I'd like to just bring you into this conversation, one, by asking, what does it mean 70 years from Brown versus Board that we're in a moment where we're still having a critical conversation around equity, diversity, inclusion for education, particularly as it relates to the study of Black people in this country?
Good morning, and thank you so much. As a product of the segregated schools and
Mm.
also teaching in the system as a result of Brown versus Board of Education, this is this time legislatively when I think of the laws and things that are being presented to us as we move forward, really just really almost take you back to, for me, to where I began. As a student, I attended segregated schools. And so that was, and much of those segregated schools, we certainly did not have the materials and equipment that students at the predominant white schools had in the town of Pendleton, where I grew up. But the one thing I will say about that education, I take my education any day and put it against any student, because the teachers that I had at that school were, one, that cared about the students. Two, they knew the students and many times knew their families. And three, they also believed that all we needed to do was to work hard and we were going to be successful, or we could be successful. And I often think of my third grade teacher, Ms. Lila Winston Gant, who would stand at the door every day having me to believe that I was the only student she was waiting for, even though she was waiting for all of them. And so our students today, as we look at Brown versus Board of Education and look at the challenges that our students face and that we face in terms of the education of our children and making sure that they understand and get to know their history and understand the importance of having a diverse education being taught to them. They don't have a problem once they're integrated into a school system and getting along with each other. That's not the problem. The problem is the adults have decided that that should not be. And so as we face this challenge, it's almost as if we're going back to that case, Brown versus Board of Education. I think I would say to you today that my greatest mistake in education has been that I did not encourage enough students that look like me to go into education. I was always pushing them to become a science, being involved in some area of science, being an engineer, being a medical doctor. But as I look at the shortage today, I say that was probably a big mistake because many of those students could have been in the classroom teaching our children today. So as we think about Brown versus Board of Education and the intent of that particular lawsuit, was not necessarily from my perspective that we had to attend the schools with white children, but it was mainly the equipment and materials, making sure that we had access to the equipment and materials so that our children, our students, could be as effective and productive as we thought it was possible. And today, as we celebrate that, I'm reflecting on the fact that my sisters and brothers attended integrated schools. I did not, but I will say that we often talk about whether or not they attended the white school or I attended the black school. They could not challenge me on the education that I received and the teachers that were a part of that education process.
Got it. Then we really appreciate your opening remarks, President Hall, particularly from your perspective and how it relates to the 70th anniversary that we're commemorating today. Brendan, I'd like to go back to you because President Hall really made a really good point that when she was teaching and in education, that while she encouraged students to go into science fields like nursing or maybe other professional fields like becoming a lawyer, she wishes that she would have had, not the opportunity, but she would have shared with folks to go into the profession of teaching. Considering what is happening, it was just announced, I think a week and a half ago, that a number of school districts across the country are going to be laying off teachers. How does this affect future teachers or future, people who are deciding that they want to get into education, and maybe they have a bit of trepidation, understandably, because of the state of affairs with education in our country? From your perspective, right, working in a space that promotes and does everything it can to uplift teachers, why would you encourage someone to continue down the path of pursuing a career in education knowing that it's under attack?
Yeah, this is a conversation we have often with educators across the country. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Rep. Robinson, coming out of Miami, the mighty UTD, and the teachers down there understands it well. But I'll say this. We're on this Facebook Live conversation with NBCSL, right? Black legislators from across the country who've come together to caucus and pass policies. But we know that where there's an NBCSL, there's Moms for Liberty, there's a conservative agenda organization running legislative, candidates, school board members, etc., attacking public education. So before we can talk about the apathy, we have to talk about what's creating the apathy. In Florida, that we joke or colloquially called it the silent strike. Florida teachers don't have the right to strike. It's in the Constitution. So when they've had enough, they just leave the classroom. But what's created that, and especially the factors for Black and Brown educators particularly. To become a teacher, you have to have a college degree. We start there in most states, in public schools, to pass certifications, etc. And so that comes with this, term we all know well. I have it, you have it. It's like, the code these days, student debt. Everyone has it. If you've gone to, college, you have some debt. And for Black and brown folks who already are mitigating factors of economic inequality to pursue that degree, you graduate with higher debt, and there's data that shows that. And we fought, and during the Trump administration, sued and won against Betsy DeVos to deal with the public service loan forgiveness program, and the fact that teachers who have been teaching for years had not received their loan forgiveness. And we won, and we've been helping educators across the country get their loan forgiveness. So that factor is big, especially for Black and brown educators, especially when you go to school and you see folks graduating with engineering degrees or business degrees and starting out with $80,000-$100,000 salaries, out the door. So the second piece is teacher pay. And so legislatively, we have to move an agenda. And that's why we work in, partnership with NBCSL on these policies. We have to move, teacher pay and support for education programs at the, not just the collegiate level, but as Rep. Hall said, at the K-12 level. We have magnet programs for science. We have magnet programs and career tech ed programs for all the different, areas of interest. We have to start also providing those supports in that learning for students who may have that interest at the K-12 level. And we do that through many of our programs, sharemylesson.com, and other platforms where we actually are giving educators curriculum and resources on how to educate students about the opportunities of careers in education. But it starts with the pay. So when you talk to a fresh out of college grad, they want to know what their salary is, and so they want to know how much they can pay that student loan debt down, or if they have the debt. So we have to mitigate those factors. Then you get to the attacks, the book bans, the culture wars, and these pieces. And so for seasoned teachers, Black educators, there's I'm not tired yet. I'm going to keep the fight fighting. But this is some mess. This has to stop. This is not what we know. For new Black educators, there's just like you see the energy of young people right now across this country. They're like, I'm doing this because I know what I'm doing this for. And there's a resolution of sorts in many of our young Black educators. I think about the former president of the Future Educators of Florida, Alana Rigby, who is now an educator in Montgomery County, Maryland, and doing amazing work with her students. And though she left Florida, when she graduated to teach in Maryland, is still fighting and supporting her friends and colleagues who she was in those education programs with in her home state. So we have to build in those supports for educators. We have to address student debt. We have to address education programs at higher education institutions, the DEI tax, I know we'll get to that, and what those are doing to the pipeline. Because these are the pipeline of how we get to a Black educator in the classroom is very long. And then the attacks are on the other side of that. So we have to address that first to get to the solutions.
Thank you. Thank you so much for really talking about addressing some of the root causes. And I want to go back to President Hall, because President Hall, you lead NBCSL, and part of the mission is to push policy and legislation. But the other thing that I think NBCSL has had a proven track record of doing is really interrupting contentious moments in time through policy and through the advocacy of your membership. And so I want to just ask for folks who may be watching this and saying, well, I'm a state legislator in a state that is a majority minority position, where the position that I hold, we're the party that I'm in, we are in the minority. How can legislators fight back against some of these attacks that we're seeing happening in their respective state, and or if they are able to lend their voice to a colleague in a different state where they know that they're having a hard time? I just want to talk about the power of elected office and how elected officials can use their power to interrupt, strikes or attempts to discard the type of education that's needed in the public sector.
Thank you. There are several ways. As president of NBCSL, of course, you mentioned the fact that we provide resolutions. Representative Robinson was one example of a resolution that was introduced that would be inclusive of our community organizations, that we would not just sit around and talk about or challenge the laws that's being brought that would negatively impact our young people, but that as an organization and as a community, we can take on some of that responsibility by making sure that we are educating our children at our churches. Our community organizations are involved in it. When you're in the legislature itself, it is very challenging when you're in the minority. And so that takes me back to the involvement of making sure that as legislators, we are well organized outside of our legislative session in making sure that we're sending the message and carrying the message about the challenges that we face and the challenges that our community face and why it's important to vote. Many of the challenges that we're facing now in the legislature has not come because all of the people went out and voted. If you would look at the number of people that voted, it's usually a small number of people that voted in the primaries. Well, that small number of people generally are the extreme in many cases in terms of their thoughts, but they're driving the train. And the only way we can push that train off the track is we're going to have to, one, have a message that makes sure that our people understand what we are facing as a challenge within the legislature and how they can be helpful in that. One, by knowing who their senator, their state senator, and their state representative is, as well as their school board members, as well as their city council members. But when I'm thinking on the state level, I'm amazed at how many even professional folks do not know their state representative or their state senator. So we as legislators find that as another role that we are challenged in doing. But it's also important for us to realize that as we help to create the message that is necessary for our people to understand why, number one, it is important for them to vote and to have and provide them the information that they need so that they will have, when they do go vote, they're doing a vote based on the intelligence and not on their emotions.
That's helpful. Thank you for that. And I want to bring our representative um, John Robinson back into this conversation just around DEI and the future. I'd like to just kind of ask you to give us a projection. So we know what's happened thus far. What do we see potentially as the next fight, or what's the next phase of the education front in this country, considering that there are many people in this country who don't want to see all of the American history taught? What do you think is coming next, and how can legislators and the public be prepared for it?
Well, I can't say what's going to come next, definitely. But what I can say, if we don't do something different than what we're doing, it's not going to be good. It's already bad, and you may not think that it can get worse, but it can. So, what I keep pushing, or what I keep on telling people or advocating for, is for us to unite, come together, and let's strategize. And when I say strategize, I know Representative Hall spoke a little bit about a resolution that I proposed, and I just want to give a little detail. That's an action plan. When the legislation came out in Florida about the Black History I had a lot of residents call my office to ask what could they do. When it came about the book ban, they were asking what could they do. And so I was trying to give them suggestions because we need actionable steps for people to take place. So we know that the Moms of Liberty are pretty much behind the book bans and a lot of this. And but they show up to school board meetings and they actually bring those books to be challenged. Well, one of the solutions that I came up with is okay, why can't our organizations, no matter who they are, come together? Let's get 100 or 1,000 books that we want banned. And I know that sounds really, we don't want to ban
Yeah.
books, but sometimes you have to use their policies against them. And basically, what the law said was find something that make you feel uncomfortable. So let's take some of these books that we know that they support and find something that makes me feel uncomfortable. And then my thing, I got to the point where I'm saying, and it may sound harsh, but I'm going to say it anyway. If the kids if they can't read a Black history book, then they don't have to read a notebook because our history is just important. Our history is American history. Our kids needs to have this knowledge. So that's one thing. When it comes to DEI, we're going to have to take control of it. We're going to have to ensure, we have to make sure that we get in positions and that we have maybe our own so that we can ensure that it's inclusive of everyone. What do I mean by that? If we were to buy, I'll say, put this out there. I was told, I think it was last year, the AKAs opened up a credit union. I thought that was powerful. What if every Divine Nine opened up a credit union? Or they came together and Black people as a whole only put half. I'm not even saying you had to put all your money in it. What type of seat at the table would that give us economically?
Yeah, that would be
Let's talk
powerful.
about very powerful. Let's talk about education. I'm a public school educator. I've been in education I'll have 30 years in November. And I support it, but I go back to what Representative Hall said, which I was kind of alluding to, but she actually just plain out said it. When Brown versus Board came up, it was about equality in textbooks, equality in actual materials. So, okay, now a lot of our schools are pushing this voucher program. What if our Black organizations came together and we opened up schools?
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have to be inclusive of just Black people. They can be for everybody. However, they definitely would teach Black history and we would ensure that they have quality education. So it's not the norm, but what I guess I'm saying is if we want to do a change, we can't be the good person all the time. We have to sometimes take the same strategies that they're using against us and play them back.
Got it. Got it. One of the things that I don't think we've really touched on this yet, but when you talk about Representative Robinson using some of Moms for Liberty tactics against them, one of the other ways that we know that education has been under attack has been through school boards. And I'd love for any one of you to touch on the power of having teachers run to be school board members and or just people running to be school board members. And Representative Robinson, I can throw it back to you because that's another avenue that we have to use to fight in this fight for education.
I totally agree. And so, like I said, I became elected. I was in the classroom as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell my teachers all the time, you're voting for someone and telling them to represent you. Sometimes you have to take that responsibility on yourself. I have a saying that I say here in Florida, and it's called Florida is mine. And that's the MINE. And that's saying it's mine because I'm saying I'm taking ownership of it. And when you own something, you're going to what? You're going to protect it. You're going to care about it. You're going to be engaged in it. You're going to fight for it. You're going to do whatever it is you need to do. And we need to get more teachers. We need to get more people in general to think in that perspective because being in the legislature, I have seen people, they don't respect teachers. Teaching, although it is one of the most important professions ever, when we actually look at how teachers are treated over the years, we talk about salary, we talk about everything, it's not happening. So how do we change that? Teachers are going to have to they're not going to have to be able to just sit back and say, I'm going to let someone else do it for me. They're going to have to take that responsibility, and a part of that responsibility is actually being a part of the legislature, being a part of the process to ensure that what needs to happen in education is happening.
Miss Knight, I love to jump in
Absolutely. Jump in.
because I one of my just the the thing I love the most about my job is when we have members and we see our members run for office. And I had the pleasure of actually stomping Florida with Carla Hernandez, president of UTD, who ran as lieutenant governor of Florida against Ron DeSantis in his running mate in 2022. And what I will say is this, and to add just to Rep. Robinson's point, it's so interesting how the folks who are writing the policies have such lack of respect for educators in these schools, and it's shown through these anti-public education policies and these attacks on our schools and all of these things. But when you go out into communities, and this is why Rep. Robinson is a powerful, member from South Florida and in her community and known and respected in her community. Educators are some of the most respected people in our communities and have always been. We entrust our children with educators uh, for a third of their minor lives, 8 hours to 10 hours a day, some schools. So when you think about that, the level of trust that folks put into educators, it definitely carries over when you talk about running for office and pursuing candidacy. In addition to that, educators are so good at understanding their communities because they see the full dynamics of the communities through the classroom. So when my leader, Frederick Ingram, Secretary Treasurer of AFT, who's also out of South Florida, often says, when we know there's a hunger issue in the community when kids come to school and they're asking for more food at lunch. We know that a child might be dealing with being unhoused or dealing with multiple housing living situations when they leave the school and change schools consistently. The teachers are able to be on the pulse of so many dynamics of their communities, which make them excellent office holders and community servants and public servants. And I'll say this because I like to reclaim things. And on the 70th anniversary of this day, and knowing what Charles Hamilton Houston and Thurgood Marshall meant for this case, and it was beyond just equality in the schools. It was equality in facilities. It was equality in American life. But what they meant for this day, and what we have to do, is take back. I will say we're not going to take the Monster Liberty play, but Black folks have been saying we need to run for office. They have taken our playbook. They have taken the playbook of the A. Philip Randolphs and the Byron Rustins and the Dr. Kings and the folks who are in the back room and organizing. They've taken our playbook and turned it back against us. We have to reclaim and do the work that we know already how to do. And that's how we got Brown. That's how we got the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And that's how we're losing them, because they have taken back our tools from us. It's not their tools from their toolbox. They're our tools. We are the original organizers. We are the original folks who do that. So yes, to Rep. Robinson's point, if you want to know how to get involved, go to your school board meetings. But also, if you know you have a teacher at that school who is the light of that school, and you're a parent or a community member and you're listening, so go to that teacher and say, maybe you should run for office. Or maybe you're that parent who needs to run for office because you have that commitment and are willing to be that fighter. That's what we have to take back in terms of being active in our communities again. But I just have to go on the record. The teachers are the most respected members of our society. They just don't see it in their pockets, in these policies lately. And in our schools as much as they should, but in communities, highly respected individuals for what they do with our children.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Mitchell. And as we bring this conversation to a close, I want to go back to one of our teachers that's on the panel, Representative Hall, who also recently received an honorary doctorate from Alabama A&M University, which is a testament to her contributions to the educational arena. I just want to leave this conversation, or I don't want to leave it without you giving us any final words just on how we can be charged and motivated moving forward, understanding that this is an ongoing fight. And as we celebrate the anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, still staying motivated to continue to educate as many Black folks and Black children that we can, and continuing to be good advocates and fighters for those of us who are in elected office moving forward.
Thank you, I think Representative Robinson as well as Brendan Mitchell, both have really tagged one of the best ways we can help to continue the work on the issue and pay tribute to the anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education is having elected officials or teachers to run for office. I'm a good example of a teacher running for office. I was approached from the community to run for the office. But I was not the candidate that was designated to win. It was those students and their parents who knew me as their classroom teacher that are responsible for me being in office today. But even more than that, I want to say as we celebrate and reflect on the anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, it feels like our work is just beginning. And in many ways it is. But also to remember that we are standing on the shoulders of many individuals who died to make sure that those of us that are in the classroom today are there serving our children, but also those of us that's serving in the legislature. The importance of us being in the legislature, and even though we sometimes may be in the minority, that our voices are not silenced and that we continue to speak up on those issues that are certainly important to the people that we represent. And always education is going to be the foundation for that. Thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this discussion, and have a good day.
Thank you so much for this community conversation. Again, we've been having a conversation around the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education with NBCSL Representative Robinson, Brendan Mitchell, and NBCSL President Representative Laura Hall. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good weekend.